Hello, and welcome to How to JavaScript. Cool. So this is the How do we JavaScript. So we'll be learning Python. I'm joking. Um, yeah, we'll go over some stuff with JavaScript because JavaScript is useful, and so people should know it. Cool. So I'm assuming people coming to this video have already got like a basic understanding of HTML and CSS, and they want to start learning how to do cool things with JavaScript. And maybe they've tried, maybe they've looked at some of the other videos and stuff on YouTube, which there's tons of great resources out there. Or maybe they've used like Free Code Camp or Code Combat, or maybe they've even tried stuff like Code Wars or something, trying to start to get into this field of web development and JavaScript and programming, and they just keep running into that initial wall that has been sort of artificially set up and makes it really difficult to just like get into web development as a whole. I mean, HTML and CSS often makes a lot of sense. It's pretty easy to pick up and you start to figure it out, but then get wanting to do more complicated and sophisticated things, and you need JavaScript, and there's all these resources out there, and it just gets confusing and it gets frustrating. At least that's been my experience. I'm self-taught, so yeah. Fortunately, I mean, if you stay at it long enough, there are tons of great resources out there, and they will eventually help you figure it out. MDN is great. Look at all their stuff. Some other really good YouTube channels. Traversy Media is awesome. So is Net Ninja. Check those out. There's a few other pretty good ones that I watch pretty often. Like Web Dev Simplified is pretty good. It seems all right. So yeah, check those out. Free Code Camp. But in this video here, I just want to cover some things that would have made it a lot easier for me, and that I would have really appreciated early on when I was trying to figure this stuff out. Cool. So using Visual Studio Code, I already got an HTML page set up. I also have Live Server, which is an extension, turned on and working in Visual Studio Code. So that's what this page on the left currently is. You can actually see that it's running a server, and I just want to show you guys how to do some stuff with good old-fashioned Hello World. Why Hello World? I have no idea. Something to do with historical context or some other mumbo-jumbo? I don't know. Point is, let's open up our dev console, which I just did. Control-Shift-I, or if you right-click, you can click Inspect, and that'll do that. And then you can go to the actual console, and we'll go over the basics of how to Hello World. Getting that first string of something interesting, in this case it's just saying hello world, onto the actual web page, and we'll look at kind of some of the ways we can do that, and I'll try to take it to a level where it's actually like meaningful. That was one of the things I found that was super frustrating when I was trying to figure these out, was they'd go over all this cool, amazing stuff with JavaScript, but it was like, okay, cool. How do I get that on the web page? How do I get that onto the thing that I'm actually working with? Like, how do they connect? And eventually it kind of fits together if you keep at it that way, but I'm hoping my videos will just make that as straightforward, no nonsense as I can possibly make it, because again, I would have really appreciated someone just saying, yeah, no, just do it the simple way, please. So I've opened up the dev console. Here, I'm gonna try, we'll zoom in some on the console, and we'll zoom in on the page. The page is empty, so there's nothing to zoom in on. All right, hello world, how do we get that in there? Well, we've opened up our console. Just type in hello world. Duh. Uncat doesn't do anything. Okay? And we get some weird syntax error, and we don't know what that is. So we'll try something else. Maybe you've heard of what a string is. So a string is just things either in double quotes, single quotes, or backticks, right? So let's try double quotes, and we'll type hello world. And we get, hey, this hello world thing right back. That's cool. So what we've done here is we've actually created a string in the console called hello world. It's not assigned to a variable. It's just in the global scope. It's just a string, says hello world, and it exists. We did it. Done. Video over. Joking. Technically, that's all there is to it. But that's still not useful, right? And that's what I often felt like a lot of videos would kind of get to the point, right? They'd be like, oh, that's how you hello world. And like, I don't know. And that's still not useful. So let's try and take it another level up. So to get a string in the console, all we had to do was add a string. Okay, cool. If you've learned anything about variables yet, if not, you're getting a quick crash course. We could say var for variable, whatever. Choose something like a word for hello, and we can set that equal. We can assign a value to that variable, and we can put that in, again, back quotes, double quotes, or we could use single quotes. Last time we used double quotes, so this time we'll use single quotes. The only thing that matters is that you're consistent, so I can't use double quotes here and then single quotes. I got to use one for both. And I could push, and then I get undefined, and then you can type in that variable name, hello, and you get hello world, and that's cool. It's in this console thing, but that still doesn't get it to the page. Well, what else could we do? We could try this console.log. What is that crap? All this says is, hey, there's this thing. It's an object called the console. And we want to call a method, which is just a fancy JavaScript word for function, which is just a fancy word for do something useful with a thing, please. And then we can go ahead and use that same variable, or we could, but we're not going to. Here, we'll use backticks this time, and we'll just type in hello world. If we push enter, we get to the console the words hello world, which we kind of did up here just by typing in the string in this console. So that's cool. We could also, again, console.log, and we could call that variable we initialized up here of hello. And we can also get hello world. That's cool. We could also declare our variables with the let or const keywords. So we could say const, and we'll say, I don't know, high-low. Why not? I don't know. Equals high-low world. We'll just say I had a stupid typo or something, and we'll case it slightly differently. Use a semicolon to say it's done, and we can, again, console.log high-low. And we get that, but again, nothing is actually getting to the DOM. So, okay, we've learned something. What did we learn? Okay, we learned strings. Strings are these things that are either in single quotes or double quotes or backticks. Cool. We also learned how to initialize a variable, that we could use the const keyword to say, hey, make this thing equal to this thing. And then we also could do that with var. We could do that with let. We haven't done that, but we know we can. Here, we'll go ahead and do it and call it, I don't know, hello with 3 L's. Hello equals something else. And we can, again, we could even just, if we're in the console, we can just type hello, and we get it. But that still doesn't get it into the actual page. Oh, so this is just in the console, and so if we refresh the page, the console's gone, and it's all gone, and that's not useful. How do I get hello world on the page using JavaScript? Excellent question. So we got to learn a few more things. We got to learn more about these object things. There's another object, and it's somewhat magical in client-side JavaScript. It's called the document. All this is a fancy word, and then that's all objects are, just fancy things, that represents the entire web page. You can think of it as saying web page. And then we're going to say document, and then we're going to call a dot a dot is for dot syntax, and it in JavaScript gives us the ability to say, hey, call this function, but this function has to exist on this object. All of these ones are predefined, so we don't have to define them ourselves. Call this function and do something meaningful. One of these functions that already exists, these are also called methods when they're on objects, they're actually technically called methods, so you should call them methods. But all a method is a function that is on or specific to a certain object. The object here being document. There's a method called query selector. Selector. And what that will do is it'll give us the chance to pass a parameter. That's a thing in these parentheses that will help us do something, because again, this is just a function, this is just a method, this is just a way to do something cool to this document thing, this web page. So what it takes for its parameter or its arguments is a selector, and we can see that the console try and helps me out here and says, hey, yeah, this is an F for function, and it takes selectors. So what does it mean by selectors? It means CSS selectors. So again, if you need to go level up your CSS, all kinds of great stuff out there on that. CSS is pretty simple to figure out. JavaScript's a little trickier. But what we're going to do is pass a string, and in this string, we're going to use a CSS selector. So if we had a ID, we could call that with the hashtag and then whatever the name of the ID was. Or if we had a class, we could call that with a dot class name. And that is our CSS selector, and it is different than this dot, right? Because it's in a series of quotation marks, making it a string. And it's in this set of parentheses, which says, hey, this is actually going to be a function that's going to do something, and we're going to pass something to this function to help us do the thing. So this dot is not the same as this dot, a little bit different, and that's because of the syntax. That's because of where it's positioned and how it's positioned. We don't have it either an ID or any classes on this page. It's a completely blank page. If we go to elements, we can see there is some stuff that we get for free from the live server, and then head code has some super basic stuff, including a title tag that says hello world, how to JavaScript. So we don't have anything in there. But we do have a body, right? Yeah, we have a body, and we can use CSS selectors to select that tag, that body tag, by just typing in the word body, right? And this is a terrible way to do this, but we can. We can then call, after we get the body tag from the document using query selector, another method. And that next method, that next function, is going to be called inner HTML. Or we could use inner text. Use inner HTML if you're going to use HTML tags, or use inner text if we're just going to add text. Technically, try to avoid doing this at all on any production anything, because it's bad and it kind of opens you up to cross-site script attacks. But for now, this is a good place for us to start. Then we can set that equal as a whole to a string. And then we can just have our semicolon, which is just like saying this is the end of the statement. And we can add an HTML tag to this. We don't have an H1 yet, so let's go ahead and add an H1. And we're just going to add our opening and closing tag. And then we'll say hello world. And we're excited. So we're going to put everything in all caps. We'll even have that fancy exclamation mark. And again, what that's going to do is access this document, the web page, and treat it as an object in JavaScript. If you need to level up on those or learn more about those, there's other videos out there, and I might have some other videos on those in the future too. And then we're going to call this function, this method that says, hey, get a hold of a CSS selector within this document. And what do I want you to get a hold of? What do I want you to grab for me? I want you to get the body. Get the body tag. And then we're going to take that document's body tag, and we are going to put its inner HTML to a specific assigned value. And if we push enter, look at that. We just hello world and got it to the actual web page. Holy crap. That's cool, right? I think it's cool. That was a huge breakthrough for me. As so many videos would just keep it in the console or something, and it wouldn't get quite to the DOM manipulation. And it's like, we need to get to the DOM manipulation. That's cool. So now we know that. What else could we do? Also, though, if we refresh, it doesn't stick around. So that's a little annoying. Here, let's cut that real quick. Let's say we say let hello. We set up a variable, we assign it a value, and let's actually assign this value to our HTML string of h1 hello world. Not quite as excited this time. Calm down a little bit. Had the cool epiphany moment. And we'll just say hello equals that. Okay, that's cool. And then we could console log it, right? And that does nothing. No. We'll go ahead and get the web page again with the document. And then we're going to call a method called query selector. And we're going to select, well, let's select the only tag we have, which is our body tag. And then we will use inner HTML. And we will set that equal to, we will assign that to our variable of hello, right? And then if we push enter, oh my goodness, it did it again. I thought that was awesome. I still think that's awesome. But again, that's cool. It's only in the console though. So what if, just hear me out, follow along with me. Let's do that to the actual web page, the source file that this page is generated from. Let's just grab that stuff that we set before. I'm going to just copy it. And I'm going to paste it over here. And then I'm going to grab that other thing, which was just setting that variable up. And I'm going to paste that over here too. And okay, cool. I save that. Does that magically work? No. For some reason it doesn't, right? Because if we refresh this page, we get the H1s kind of showing up, but there's all this extra crap. And why is that? Well, this is JavaScript. JavaScript can't just be thrown on the web page. If it's thrown directly on the web page thinks that it's not JavaScript and that it's just normal text. So it treats it like normal text. So we need to specify, hey, web page, this is not regular text. This is JavaScript. And how are we going to do that? You may have noticed I just cut that. Well, we're going to set up just a script tag. And with that script tag, we could sit there and define what kind of script the tag this is. We don't really need to because the default is JavaScript. And then I can paste that in there and it should magically work now, right? Well, let's see what happens. Well, we're using the let keyword, and the let keyword helps us out some, but it doesn't show up, so I must be lying, right? No, we get this cool error, right? Error. Cannot access hello before initialization. Oh yeah, so with variables, when we use let and const, this thing called variable hoisting you may have heard of before doesn't quite work the way it normally does in JavaScript. It works more like it does in other programming languages, which is you can't use a variable until you declare it, then you can use it. All right, does that make sense? So you got to say what it is first, and then you can use it. If we just use var, though, and save it, we don't get that cool fancy error, but we get this weird undefined. And that gets kind of confusing and frustrating, right? So we want to use let or const. We're going to use, here, let's use const. Does const magically fix it? No, because again, we're trying to access hello before we've defined it. So let's just switch the order on that. Then what happens? Hey, it works. And that is all there is to it. To get hello world into the DOM with JavaScript, we need to set up a script. We don't have to set it to a variable, but we can. And then we need to go ahead and get a hold of something within the DOM right there. And we do that using the document object and then this method called query selector, which takes a parameter of a tag. And then we're going to set its inner HTML to, well, we're setting it to our variable, but we could just get rid of the variable and we could comment it out. So that's what those double slashes do. We could just paste that in there and we could try that, but you'll notice that doesn't work and it does something weird, right? Oh yeah, that's because again, now the web page is treating that thing in between the script tags as JavaScript, but it does not know what an angle bracket is or an H1 or another angle bracket. It doesn't know what that is. So we need to let it know that, hey, we want you to treat that as a string. And we're going to do that by putting that in, again, either single quotes, double quotes, or backticks. Let's use backticks because we haven't used those too much yet. So I put a backtick to start, a backtick at the end. You notice it added some extra spacing. Doesn't really make much of a difference. Oh, well, totally does. I mean, it doesn't know that it's supposed to be treating that as an actual tag. So we need to get rid of those extra spaces. And then we save that. And again, the page can render that out. So that's pretty cool. But at the same time, you said that I probably shouldn't do that, right? Because that's going to make my site vulnerable to these cross-site attack things. I don't know what those are yet. Those sound scary. Also, I can only put it on the body. Normally, my web pages will have like a whole bunch of other HTML that you've set up, right? Like a bunch of divs, and the divs, maybe you're using a CSS library. Maybe you already have your H1 defined, and you want a specific paragraph. And maybe you even have multiple paragraphs, right? And maybe you only want the second one to be updated because you want this last one to say 3, you want this one to say 1, you want to change 2 to something else. Maybe your H1 says hello world already, and you're not doing that with JavaScript. So now, if we reload, we're only getting that hello world because the document is selecting the body tag and setting all of its inner HTML to just hello world. Well, that's annoying. If I want it to be the same as what it is up there, I'm going to have to copy all that in here. And if I'm not using backticks, well, that's just not going to work because my syntactical highlighting, and I get these weird, scary errors, which are useful to letting me know that there's something going on, and nothing comes in there. All right, well, if we go back to using backticks, it starts to treat it like a string again. Okay, cool. So for some reason, backticks have magic powers. They totally do. It's thanks to ES6. One of those magic powers that we get from backticks is that it'll treat white space as a part of a string. So that way you can have line breaks and extra tabs and stuff, and it'll still know, hey, this is all part of the same string. That's kind of annoying. I mean, and it's still, like you said, vulnerable to these cross-site attacks. I'm like, oh, okay, I still don't know what half that crap means, right? So what we'll do is we'll put that back up there. We'll fix it up so that way it's working like our regular web page does with just the markup. Maybe you've got your own CSS library, or maybe you're using, like, I don't know, Bootstrap or Foundation or something. I don't know. Use whatever. Or write your own. It does not matter. But I want to do something cool with my JavaScript, and I want to change the contents of that second paragraph tag. Well, okay, one way you could do that is we could set an ID on that second paragraph tag and call it, let's call it 2. We'll call it 2. And then we can use our query selector down here, and we could say use the ID of 2 and set that to, well, here, let's go back to using our variable. If we try to leave our variable in a string, it doesn't quite work. one of the cool superpowers about backticks, though, is we could use these things called template literals, which is just use a money sign and some curly braces, and then you put your variable inside that, and then that'll magically work. And that's kind of cool because, I mean, now it says hello world, which from my normal H1 and then 2 has been changed to hello world. And if I look at that, I should be able to see that on the original source file, it still looks the way it does over here in my editor. But if I come over here and I inspect, I can see that, hey, that paragraph tag is still there, and it still has that ID of 2. And now it has that H1 nested in it, and that's kind of neat. So maybe I could change that. Maybe I want that to instead just use a span tag, right? Does that still work? Yeah, that totally does, right? And then we could use like we could be terrible people and use inline CSS and just say style, color, I don't know, red, hot pink. Let's use hot pink. That one sounds way cooler. Hot pink, right? Oh, helps if we actually know what we're doing. Let's just use red because I don't remember, and then we can play with it. So we can see, hey, that makes it red. That's cool. And I can go play with the DOM, kind of navigate. I can see that color equals red. And then I really do want it to be hot pink, so I can figure out, oh, okay, yeah, I can't have hyphens in my CSS. I should already know that. Everyone should already know that, right? That's basic CSS. But we could do that, and hey, look, now it's hot pink. That's cool. It's already slightly more useful. It's closer to what we want, but what else could we do? Well, we could also select with a class name. I don't know why you'd have a class of 2, but if we save it, we can see it doesn't apply the style, but we can then use query selector to select with the class name, and that'll work. Or we could select with just a paragraph tag, but if we do that, it changes the first one. I don't want it to change the first one, right? I want it to change the second one. Well, this class isn't doing nothing, so I could leave it because maybe it's doing something else up here. Maybe you have some internal CSS for 2 that's, I don't know, changing the color to hot pink again. I don't, pink. Here, let's use blue. I don't know, blue's a good color. Helps if we actually define that that should be a style, right? Then we can see 2 is like that, and we want it to be like that. Okay, and we'll get rid of our inline CSS. But we still want that second one to be influenced. So if we just use query selector, that's not going to work because that always selects the first thing that returns a true answer. And if we go through this here, DOM, the first paragraph is this one. It's not this one. So another fancy method that we could use is query selector all. What that's going to do is give us all of them. So then if we save that, doesn't even work, right? We could go to our console. We don't even get an error, so that gets super like frustrating, right? You're like, what is going on? Well, how do we even debug this? Shoot. What if we use that console log thing that you've probably seen in 100 other videos, including this one? And what if we debug by maybe setting this whole thing to a variable, right? Let's see, I don't know, we'll call it a constant because I don't think it's going to be changing too much, and call this one hey, set that equal to that. I'm like, well, why'd I do that? That doesn't do anything. Well, what if we go ahead and console log hey, and then we see hello world. Okay, so it's kind of working. It's not working. So when we use query selector all, we get all of the paragraph tags. So we don't have one, we have a whole bunch of them. Let's get rid of hey, that's not doing anything. We have like a whole array almost, which if you haven't learned your data types yet, now you know what an array is. It's a list of things. So we could say const array paragraphs, paragraphs array, paragraphs, array paragraphs. equals, and we'll use query selector all, right? And we'll console log that real quick. Sweet, we get this node list, which is an array, which is just a list of things. Literally, an array is it's like a list of variables. It's anything in square brackets. It can be a string, you can have numbers in JavaScript. JavaScript's pretty nice that way. You could have booleans, helps if I spell true correctly. You could have all that stuff. That's an array. Cool. It doesn't help me though. I want to make the second paragraph have this hello world text. And in fact, let's change that to hello from JavaScript. I figured out how to do that before, but maybe I don't want to select with the class name or the ID anymore. How could I change it? Well, it's an array, right? So arrays in all programming languages, well, I guess not all. There are some that, like XSL, that are dead languages that are confusing and do not follow it. They're these things, these lists, right? They're zero indexed. That means they start counting from 0 instead of 1, which when you're first starting out, that's confusing as crap because it literally changes all numbers by like one value. But you can access a specific item within an array using these square brackets and then just specifying which item you want. Starting with the first item, which is at index 0. It's the first thing, so it's 0, and then this would be 1, 2. So if I go ahead and type in 0, and then I use that inner HTML thing again, and then I set that equal to my constant above, save that. Hey, I got the first one to change, cool. So then, okay, well, I don't want that one to change. I want that second one to change, so I'm gonna call that one 1, because again, zero indexing, that weird way of counting. And hello from JavaScript, we are in business. Cool. Maybe I want to change all of the paragraph tags to have the same text. Why? I don't know. Sounds fun. Let's figure out how to do that. How would we do that? Well, we have an array, right? What if we use another method that exists out there? MDN is great for this, by the way. You just start Googling these things and you'll start to figure it out. And watch videos like this, and then you're like, I don't know what that is. Then Google that thing like query selector all, or this other method that we're going to use called for each. So we'll use dot notation to access the method for each. And that's just another way of looping through things. So if you know what loops are, it's just a way of looking at something over and over again. Or with the for each, it's the way of looking at everything once in an array. Right? And then we're going to set up these parentheses, and it's going to take some kind of parameter. In this instance, the parameter is actually going to be a function. Call this a callback. That also gets kind of tricky. I'm throwing a whole bunch at you. Watch this video like 20 times, then go back to watching other people's videos, and it'll all start to sink in. And then Google each of these things, find them on MDN, read the documentation, and it'll all come together. So we're going to declare our function inside of this here for each. We're going to use this thing called arrow syntax. Go ahead and Google that too, arrow syntax. And that's just another way of declaring functions. Oh shoot, I don't even know how to declare functions. Watch another video. There's plenty of them out there that'll explain how to do that. And we're going to say for each, and we're going to say paragraph, because that's what these are. We're going to go for each paragraph. We want you to take the paragraph and update its inner HTML, because that's what we've been using. Go ahead and Google inner HTML too. We want that to be the same for all of them, and we want all of them to equal that constant of hello. So what happens if I save that? Hello from JavaScript. There we go. So we're figuring out a little bit about DOM manipulation and kind of putting all of these things together. This is hopefully a pretty short video. I'm not even sure how long have I been rambling. A couple minutes. I don't know. Quick little video though that'll show you a little bit higher level kind of basic application of these sorts of things, of how we can start using JavaScript in an actual HTML file to start doing useful, interesting, and meaningful things, right? And once you get a little bit more comfortable doing some of these basic things, you can start doing more complicated things like connecting to a database or connecting to an API and then going and looping through everything in a database or an API and having something happen to the DOM that is useful and interesting. And with that, you're programming. You're getting into this web development field. It's a long, crazy journey. Have fun. Break some stuff. You're not gonna break anything too bad as long as you're like just playing with like JavaScript on the front end like this. You've probably heard of Node. Node's cool. Hold off on Node. Play with the front end a little bit longer. Get a feel for that, and then go ahead and play with Node. Also, other programming languages. You can learn a lot. So, hopefully this has been useful. We covered a lot. Watch the video a couple times. Hopefully it'll make sense. Hopefully this is helpful. Thanks. Bye. Oh, this is how to JavaScript. Bye.